Good evening. Let's call to order the Charter Review Committee meeting of November 6th at 5 p.m. The city does not tolerate disruptive behavior in our meetings. Sunnyvale prides itself on the rich diversity of our residents. We are committed to creating a culture of belonging where members of our diverse community feel included, safe, and respected. This Charter Review Committee meeting is considered a limited public forum, which means the committee can regulate the time, place, and manner of speech. Speaker comments must be limited to the agenda item being considered by the committee for consent calendar or public hearing items. Speaker comments during oral communications must be limited to matters within the committee's subject or the committee's authority, generally referred to as within the committee's subject matter jurisdiction. If a speaker's comments are not related to an agenda item, the presiding officer will rule the speaker out of order. A speaker will not be ruled out of order because of a disagreement with the content of their speech. Location and online meeting details are available on the Charter Review Committee's agenda. Use the Show Captions button to view captions on Zoom. Comments on matters not on the agenda must be submitted prior to the time I call the item for oral communications. Comments on agenda items must be submitted prior to the time I close the public hearing on that agenda item. Speakers are requested to keep their comments to the time period set for public comments for the agenda item, which will be strictly enforced. Guidelines are posted on the city's website and on the Charter Review Committee agenda. And now, please join me for the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. City Clerk, may we please have the roll call?
Yes, members, please request to speak. Chair Larson,
Here.
Vice Chair Wickham. Here. Member Vickery,
Here.
Member Newswanger,
Here.
Member Philly,
Here.
Member Wee,
Present.
Member Olafson,
Here.
Member Rubino,
Present.
Member Davis,
Present.
9 present with Member Pine absent.
Thank you. And Member Pine's absence is excused. So now we go to oral communications. This is the public's opportunity to address the committee on topics not listed on tonight's agenda. This section is limited to 15 minutes and may be extended or continued after the public hearing's general business section of the meeting. Individuals may only speak once during oral communications. This Charter Review Committee meeting is a limited public forum, and the committee can regulate the time, place, and manner of speech. Speaker comments during oral communications must be limited to matters within the committee's authority, which is known as the committee's subject matter jurisdiction. If a speaker's comments are outside the committee's subject matter jurisdiction, the presiding officer will rule the speaker out of order. This allows the committee to conduct its business in a reasonably efficient manner and protects the rights of other speakers. A speaker will not be ruled out of order because of disagreement with the content of their speech. Please submit a speaker card to the city clerk, or raise your digital hand now, or dial *9 on a telephone to indicate you wish to speak. The city clerk will call on members of the public participating in person first, followed by remote participants. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. City Clerk, do we have any in-person participants wishing to speak on oral communications?
No, Chair.
Thank you. And anyone else wishing to speak? No. In person? Okay. Because of the nature of remote communications, speakers who are ruled out of order will not be given another chance to speak on this item. Therefore, speakers are warned to limit their comments to subjects that fall within the committee's authority to decide or take action. City Clerk, do we have any remote participants wishing to speak on oral communications?
No, Chair.
Thank you. I will go ahead and close oral communications. And now we move on to the consent calendar. So I will start by opening public comment on the consent calendar items. Please submit a speaker card to the city clerk or raise your digital hand now or dial *9 on a telephone to indicate you wish to speak. The city clerk will call on members of the public participating in person first, followed by remote participants. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. City Clerk, do we have any in-person participants wishing to speak on a consent calendar item?
No, Chair.
Thank you. And we'll go to remote participants. City Clerk, do we have any remote participants wishing to speak on a consent calendar item?
No, Chair.
Thank you. So I will close the public comment on this. And I will, before asking for a motion, just note that there was a revision to the agenda. So we're considering the revised revision to the minutes. So we're considering the revised minutes. So I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues. Do we have a motion on the consent calendar? Member Olofsson.
I move that we approve item 1A and 1B on the consent calendar.
And is that 1B as revised?
As revised, yes.
Okay, thank you. And do we have a second for that motion? Member Newswanger.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on or advocacy on the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk, please call a roll call vote.
Members, please request to speak. Member Olofsson.
Yes.
Member Davis.
Abstain.
Member Wee.
Yes.
Member Vickery.
Yes.
Member Philly.
Yes.
Chair Larson.
Yes.
Member Newswanger.
Yes.
Vice Chair Wickham. Yes. The motion carries 7-1-1 with Member Pine absent and Member Davis abstaining. Oh. I apologize. Member Rubino.
Yes.
Now the motion carries
Okay.
7-1-1. Thank you.
Is it 8-1-1, I think? I'm sure that.
8.
Okay.
8.
Okay,
1,
good.
1.
Good. Just making sure we hadn't lost another committee member. Don't want that. We like all of you. We need everyone. All right. Next is public hearings, general business. So now we go to agenda item 2, file number 25-1055. Discuss and provide feedback on subcommittee draft report regarding city council vacancies. There's no staff report, so we will go directly to a subcommittee report. Does the subcommittee have comments or report? Member Newswanger.
The council was concerned that currently if a vacancy occurs in the second half of a council member's term, then the seat may be filled by appointment and the newly appointed council member may be replaced at the next primary election. The newly elected council member will be replaced again at the next general election just 5 or 8 months later. It's very disruptive and inefficient of time and money to have a council member who serves for only 5 or 8 months, so the council asked us to consider other options. The subcommittee unanimously agreed that we should not be electing an interim council member who would only serve for 5 or 8 months. We recommend holding elections in this situation to the next general rather than primary election. The second question that came up is whether the primary election should be used instead of a general election if a vacancy occurs in the first half of the term. We called this a hybrid option in our report. If the primary election is used, then the vacancy will be filled sooner and the newly elected council member would serve for more than 2 years, but the benefits of the November election would be forfeited. The benefits of a November election include lower cost and higher voter turnout, and these are not insubstantial differences. Costs are impossible to predict without knowing all the variables, but holding an election during a primary could cost double or maybe 5 times more than a November election. Voter turnout is substantially higher during general elections, typically more than 50% higher than in primary elections. More importantly, the voters in general elections better represent the diversity of the community. Voters who are low income, young, independent, Asian, Black, and Latino all have proportionately lower turnout in primary elections. For these reasons, the subcommittee believes that holding elections to replace appointees is fairer and best done during the November election. And this is a side note. I noted that when I reread our report, we did not include this breakdown of underrepresented voters, but it would be a useful and clarifying addition to the report, which we can talk about later. We made the decision to only use November elections at one of our first subcommittee meetings, and so we did not consider the issue when we made the public survey questions. We did consider the survey results, however, which revealed that 7% of respondents checked other and wrote in a hybrid option to a question that was not really intended to address this issue. We considered the recently adopted language in Pasadena that was circulated among the committee. But their situation is substantially different than ours, partly because they hold election in odd years. After reconsideration, we continue to favor only November elections to replace appointments. The subcommittee was very concerned about the potential very high cost of standalone special elections, and we considered a change that would have eliminated the possibility of using standalone special elections. I did not do a good job of explaining this proposal at the meeting 2 months ago when we were creating questions for the public survey. I didn't recognize until after the meeting that staff and I were talking about different solutions, different frameworks. And what we said just made no sense to the others. We were sort of talking like this. And we've talked about how that was. So I apologize for not explaining more clearly. Now, the results of the survey question that we developed for this issue did support the fiscally conservative use of November elections, 65%. However, we also got valuable feedback during that meeting that made us reevaluate our thoughts. We ended up dropping this proposal from our report in favor of keeping options open for the city council to choose a standalone special election if the political, financial, and electoral situation favored that option. And while we're talking about special elections, the current runoff special election for county assessor will cost $13 million and likely have dismal voter turnout during the December holiday period. It would have been eliminated if the county used ranked choice voting or several other alternative voting systems that we considered at the beginning of our sessions. So the report includes draft language for consideration, and I'll just let you read that for yourselves in the report. I guess for staff, I think the language is good. I know you'll be reviewing it. I'd like just to be sure that it works for not only appointments, but for when there's not an appointment been made for a vacancy. I think it's fine, but it'll be nice to have your opinion. The second issue that we discussed in our subcommittee was how many council members may serve by appointment at any one time. This issue was thoroughly considered in 1975 and in the 2018 Charter Review Committees. The 1975 amendment considerably limited the number of appointments, but there was concern for the high cost of special elections. that would be required in lieu of appointments. It barely passed with 51%. The 2018 amendment revised this to allow more appointments, which could decrease the likelihood of expensive, low turnout special elections, but increase the risk that 4 council members could capture the council and bestow the advantages of incumbency on the appointees. This one passed with 71% of the vote. In our public survey, 51% of respondents would rather keep the 2018 amendment with which limits to 2 simultaneous appointees. The subcommittee recommends no change on this subject. The third question was whether the duration of appointments should be limited. The committee believes that the disadvantages of multiple short-term appointees with associated disruptions, inefficiency, and the costs outweigh the potential advantages of shorter appointments. And so the subcommittee does not recommend a limit on the duration of appointments. We have one additional matter that's non-substantive, and Member Vickery is going to talk about that one.
As we were reading the language of 606, we discovered in 606C that there's an ambiguity about the supermajority requirement for filling the vacancy by appointment or by calling an election. And the current language says that the city council shall, by affirmative vote of at least 4 of the remaining council members, do something. The problem we have is that section 600B defines city council and council to include the mayor and 6 city council members. So it distinguishes between the mayor and the other 6 council members. And 606B also refers to the office of mayor or council member. The problem is that because of those distinctions in another part of the charter between the mayor and council members, the 606C could be read that the city council, the 7 members of the city council, act, but the affirmative vote that's needed excludes the mayor. It's an affirmative vote of at least 4 of the remaining council members. Fortunately, section 701 of the charter dealing with emergency ordinances has a supermajority provision, which is very simple. It just refers to the number of affirmative votes that are required. So our proposal is to amend that if there is another amendment being proposed for 606, that we include in the measure this non-substantive correction, so that 606C would then read, within 60 days of the date the office is officially declared vacant, the city council shall, by at least 4 affirmative votes, elect to fill the vacancy by appointment or by calling an election. So we believe that that pattern of language from 701 would solve this possible problem. Ambiguities in language occur all the time, and we often just live with them. But when you're dealing with an issue that might be contested, it would probably be best not to have an ambiguity as whether or not there was a sufficient vote to actually pass the matter under the charter language.
Okay, thank you to the subcommittee for that report. And now we'll go to the committee in general for questions on this topic, on this report. So we'll start with Member Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Subcommittee, for the report. It's well written, very clear. I find the portions on the background of what was going on in the 70s very fascinating. the charter being amended in 1975. I was born in 74, so obviously I couldn't vote then. My vocabulary was probably less than 100 words. Is there any more background that you found about how the system was? Thank you.
Member Newswanger.
Really, I think the answer is no. It's been months since we reviewed that, and so I don't remember it in specific detail, but we pulled out, I think, the relevant portion for the report.
Thank you. I think he has more time on his hands now. Maybe we could get Larry Stone to share. I think he actually had a hand in this charter amendment. So, but the report itself is the report that the subcommittee wrote. I found it very clear. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Next is Vice Chair Wickham.
Yes, subcommittee, thank you so much for the report. I did want to get a little bit more clarification about the cost of a primary election. It sounded like it was more expensive than a general election. Is that the cost to the city or the cost to the candidate? And why is it more expensive for the primary than the general?
Member Newswanger.
We were talking about cost for the city. I don't know that we talked about cost for the candidate, but I doubt it's a lot different. The city has elections during general elections, and so adding a new individual item the marginal cost is not very much, or relatively not very much. But we may not have anything on the ballot in the primary election unless we have, one of these special elections for a vacancy. And it costs us more to get on the ballot. And it depends a lot on the various factors, like how many things are we putting on the ballot, because cost averaging decreases if there's more things. And I think there's other things that I'm not thinking of right now. So yes, the cost is lower for the city on a general election than it is during a primary election, but it varies a lot. And I mean, when we looked at the letter that we got from Connie, I think the cost to add an election to a general was in the tens of thousands, whereas for the primary election, it was in the low hundreds of thousands. So it could be, double-ish.
Thank you.
Next is Member Olofsson.
Yeah, I'm just referring back to the letter or the information provided by staff on the June meeting. District 3 and 5 on the November 8th, 2022 general election cost the city just under $77,000. The estimate for doing a standalone election in April or June of that year ranged from 220,000 when Councilmember Fong resigned, ranged from June of 227,000 to a high of 1.9 million to 3.1 million. So based on that information from the Registrar of Voters, that strongly influenced our recommendation.
Thank you. And just a question to staff to follow on to that. The dollar amounts that were given there, that was for everything combined that the city was putting on that ballot, right? That was not like 76,000 for one seat and 76,000 for the other. It was cost for both.
Yeah, like for example, the $76,000 was for District 3 and 5. And if I could just add, I think, the committee did a really good job on the report and analyzing, but it really, the estimates really depend on a lot of factors, district, like, special election, standalone election, there's a lot of variables. And so I think we're staff, where we struggle with some of the questions is it's difficult for us to give you an exact number, because we'd have to go to the registered voters and say, we need an estimate for a standalone election or an election, in the general election of 2028 for District 4, right? Because you need all those variables for the register voter to plug in to be able to spit out a specific number. So we went back, the information that the committee members reported on, we went back and just based on, actual scenarios and actual examples, numbers that we received from the registered voters at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was very helpful to have see the actual numbers and get an order of magnitude sense of where they are. I also wanted to check in. I think there was a staff comment on some of the language in this report, just a minor.
I thought it might be helpful to make just one comment about, there was some discussion about term limits, and I think the discussion in the report is accurate, but I do also want to make sure the committee understands there is a provision in the term limits section related to city council members about term limits, and it provides that term limits are of less than 2 years are not counted as terms for purposes of like future city council membership. So if a council member was appointed for less than 2 years and then was subsequently elected, that period of time for the appointment would not count towards term limits as a council member. But if the appointment was for longer than 2 years, it would count toward term limits. So I just wanted to be sure that it's a little bit nuanced, but depending on how in depth you get into the term limits discussion, I wanted to be sure everybody understood that piece too.
Thank you. Good clarification. Okay, we'll go to Member Rubino, followed by Member Newswanger.
Yeah, just wanted to know if you've looked at other cities and what other cities do.
Well, to answer that question, we primarily looked only at our own city and our own history. We did look at the Pasadena charter amendment that they did a year-ish ago because it was circulated among the committee. And then regarding the term limits, we weren't so concerned about what you were talking about as we were with the cost of benefits if someone was there for more than a year, and then the effect of incumbency on reelection. Those were the things that weighed more in our decision.
Thank you. Other committee members, other questions? Yeah, I have to agree. It's a very, very clear, well-written report, and really want to thank the subcommittee. That's probably why we don't have a whole lot of questions right now. So now we will, Member Vickery.
This is actually a question for staff. The email that you sent suggested that the registrar of voters will actually do an estimate of a cost of an election if you give them 6 weeks to do it. Not knowing anything about that process, if this should go forward, would that be something that we would want to ask to be done so that we had the best information we could have about potential cost? I mean, we obviously are emphasizing cost a lot in our rationale. So is that something that we think we should do if this goes forward?
I'll look to staff for that one.
If the committee does want to request a specific estimate from the register of voters, we need to, it's a scenario-based request, right? So you have to say, is it for the mayor? Is it for, you know, a general election? Is it for a primary? So you'd have to be very clear on which parameters you want to use. But that would be something that if the committee wants to do, as long as you give us very defined parameters, we could definitely make that ask.
Okay, and Vice Chair Wickham.
Yeah, speaking of the term limit and the, 2-year, if it's less than 2 year, it doesn't count towards the term limit calculation. And if it's greater than 2 years, it does. In this recommendation, is there any scenario where someone's appointment would be for more than 2 years?
Member Newswanger.
I think the answer is yes, but only slightly. I'd have to look back at the chart to evaluate, but if a council member resigns or if the seat becomes vacant just after the deadline to become a candidate in the November election, 2 years before the end of the term, then the appointment would be for that 2 years plus whatever, like 3 months before the January. Did that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So I think we're required to call an election at least 80 days before the election date. And so it would be if someone resigned after that 80-day deadline had passed. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. So there are no other questions from the committee. So now I will go to the public. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this item. Please submit a speaker card to the city clerk or raise your digital hand now or dial *9 on telephone to indicate you wish to speak. The city clerk will call on members of the public participating in person first, followed by remote participants. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. City clerk, do we have any in-person participants wishing to speak on this item?
Yes, Chair. We have Zachary K. followed by Steve S. Zachary, please approach the lectern. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
You can prevent the historic appointment incumbency advantage exploit referenced in the report. Just make appointed council members and appointed mayors ineligible to seek voter-elected municipal positions while still residing in office and also after some significant period of time after they departed. The voter-approved 1975 reform was heavily weakened in 2018 over cost concerns. Special elections are expensive. Approaching the incumbency advantage exploit via eligibility is just a matter of checking the potential candidate against a dirty list. Most often the dirty list is empty, no effect. No effort. When a person is appointed to office, the appointee is added to the dirty list along with the deletion date corresponding to when they are eligible as a candidate again. A few seconds of effort. There is minimal effort required to implement this.
Next, we have Steve. Steve, please approach the lectern. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee.
If you could put up my presentation, I'd appreciate it. What we see here is this is the first vacancies that occurred after the 1975 or 1976 implementation. Something that's very important to notice is we did elections, special elections, three of them, okay? And then all of a sudden we had an aberration and everybody got freaky about it. Let's use that word, okay? And I'll be sort of blunt on this. the city council weaponized the fact that we had an aberration. We fixed the aberration in 2018-19 with a change, but it was weaponized and it's kept on. Stuff happens. We fixed it, okay? What happened? We had the special election, people weaponized it, and then we had an appointment, okay? When we should have had an election or left it vacant, okay? The next one. How do I make it work? Okay, no. Can you make it go to the next one? I don't seem to be able to do it. There we go. Some suggestions for you. Table 2, be specific on your min and max lengths. Don't just say 5 more, 8 more. Page 3, same thing. Also disclose that in your report, please, that the survey background did not reveal the existing situation. Page 4, 606, municipal special election consolidated with a statewide, it's already there. Page 4 implies it was not allowed to consolidate. That wording is also there. It's very important to retain flexibility. Very, very important to do that. Page 5, voters unlikely understood the nuances allowed with more than one appointment. And my recollection is that Larry Stone wanted one, and I don't know why he changed. I have no idea. I was in the room, okay? More likely, they were thinking about the unusual aberration. Stuff happens. Get over it, okay? 1975 said only would be seated by elections, okay? Page 6, 51% of survey respondents choosing 2 appointments. They were not told. Members of the public did give you input that we wanted to have clarity and transparency. That was chosen not. I'd like you to use the word clarity, and transparency was missing. 10-month appointment, page 7. 10 is not a short appointment. If it's going to occur longer than 10 months, instead of putting another person in for 3 or 4 months, just start out with an election. That would be good. So here's the last thing I'll put up, only 15 seconds. Very good look at this. And thank you, Mr. Newswanger, tonight. You've just identified an illegal option that is going to occur. If the council does not also make other changes with a vacancy, you have caused an illegal choosing your voters based on racial criteria. So you might want to think about that in the city clerk's office. So if it's implemented without making these other changes, you will have executed an illegal choice. Thanks.
Chair, that was the final in-person speaker wishing to speak on this agenda item.
Thank you. Remote speakers are warned to limit their comments to the agenda item being considered. Speakers who are ruled out of order will not be given another chance to speak on this item. This is for agenda item 25-1055. City Clerk, do we have any remote participants wishing to speak on this item?
No, Chair.
Thank you. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the committee for additional discussion. And I don't think we're taking motions tonight, right? We'll do straw polls if needed, as needed.
That is correct.
Okay, great. So we will start with Member Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question for it's partly legal staff. My understanding is that we cannot actually prohibit somebody from running. This came up when Spitaleri was appointed, right? That, but it is perfectly appropriate for council members to ask the question and refuse to vote to appoint anyone who says that they will run. Do I understand that correctly?
I think just as we can't prevent people from running for election, the council can choose to ask questions and consider answers of potential appointees in making their decision. And certainly they can't, they shouldn't be taking sort of discriminatory motives into account as they make their decision. But, you know, as far as positions of potential appointees, things like that, issues that you would otherwise campaign on if you were running for election, the council can consider those factors as they're deciding who to vote to appoint.
Thank you. I was just wanting to make sure we got that in the record. And maybe if the League of Women Voters or someone who runs candidate forums in the future, this could be one of the hypothetical questions you ask of council candidates. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other questions? Member Newswanger.
Sorry, I'm going to be talking too much. I apologize to Mr. Scandalis because he said so many things that I couldn't understand everything. And I would like to hear again, if it's okay with the chair, the comment about the illegal option.
We've already closed the public hearing is the challenge.
I see.
All
All right, well, that's fine then. City staff, do you have a comment about illegal options? We would need to know more, maybe.
To be honest, I didn't quite follow what was illegal.
Okay, that was,
all right.
Chair,
Yeah.
if you're open to reopening the public comment so that the committee could ask questions of the public speaker, obviously that is within your purview. Just
Okay.
wanted to put that up there.
Okay, if I'm allowed to do it, then I will do that. So I will just get this procedurally correct. I'll reopen the public hearing for the purposes of asking questions of the public. So, Mr. Scandalis, if you would be so kind as to approach the lectern. It seems like the committee has some questions. So we'll go back to Member Newswanger first to ask the questions.
the question is just, would you re-explain your comment about the illegal option that you see?
Okay. Eliminating or choosing a particular election and style based on who's going to show up is picking your voters. So if I choose to have March elections because the people north of Central Expressway show up more, that may or may not be valid or have a problem. But if I go in March because the people north of Central Expressway are more Hispanic and Tongan, I've now created an illegal situation. You have picked your voters based on a racial identification. So it was discussed that African American and Latino and something tend not to show up as much in primaries, meaning the bridge has already been crossed. Okay, any decision that's made after tonight becomes illegal if you take away that, if you do a choice based on who you're going to hope shows up at which election. It just can be done. It'll be challenged. Use the word crash and burn. 2024, the measure crashed and burned.
Thank you.
So it's already, the trip point has already occurred. Okay, because we're now considering picking an election based on picking which voters who will come. So there you have it. It's already been tripped. And there's no going back on it, Melissa.
Thank you. And just to check with Mr. Newswanger, were there any other questions or was that the question?
I guess my question would be from staff, but maybe this is not the right.
So maybe I'll just close the public hearings and then you please continue.
Does staff have any comments?
Well, I don't recall any discussion and I have not seen any data that this committee has considered related to who shows up at which elections. My understanding of the discussion and my reading of this report is that the analysis was how many people show up to vote in elections, not which people. And my reading of your report relates to the number of people showing up, how many voters total we get. If there's data that I missed related to, specific groups of people, we probably would need time to look at that, but I've been sitting here for all of your discussions over the last 10 months, and I have not heard that discussion at all. So I think it sounds speculative to me because we just don't have data before this commission that says who shows up at which elections.
Well, I mentioned it in my verbal comments. The data is not from Sunnyvale, it's from other elections.
I think that the committee can still take into account factors like the total number of voters that show up for elections, the cost of elections. You're looking at many, many other factors other than specific groups of people showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Member Olafson, followed by Member Rubino.
Thank you, Chair. In all the discussions we had concerning this issue, we were looking at quantity of voters, not the demographics. We looked at no demographic data. All we looked at was the quantity of voters in primary and general elections, special elections, noting that elections other than the general election had generally substantially lower turnout. And it was that issue that led us to believe that it was more representative of Sunnyvale with a larger number of voters participating in the election. Like I said, we didn't look at any demographics. We didn't have any demographics to look at. So the issue that was raised in just a verbal presentation was never a consideration when we were developing the information for our recommendation, nor did it appear in our report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Now we'll go to Member Rubino, followed by Member Newswanger.
I just want to say one thing, and that is that a special election, I don't think you can infer all the time that people won't come to it. And I think the election on Tuesday is a good example of that. It depends what else is on the ballot. And I think one of the considerations on this vacancy is snooping around to see if there's other things in the county that might be a special election to come into the play of whether or not you go to a special election or not. So if there's a county, tax measure or something, or someone's resigned, like happened with the assessor, well, then you can piggyback and it doesn't cost as much money. And I just don't think we should preclude special elections. I think there needs to be that option. The fact that someone could be appointed for, almost 2 years is a long, long time. And it gives them, as the public has mentioned, it gives them a real up on incumbency. Because sitting people typically win in a small city like we are. That's what all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Member Newswanger, followed by Member Vickery.
I just wanted to say that the comments that Member Olafson made are accurate. This portion of what I said tonight was my own opinion or addition and not discussed in our subcommittee.
Thank you. And now Member Vickery, followed by Member Davis.
So just in case someone is making a record, I think I, as a member of the subcommittee, would like to say the same thing that Member Olson said, which is that what we considered on voter turnout was the the total voter turnout, and I think it's reflected on page 2 of the report in the chart, where under voter turnout, what you will see is highest voter turnout, about 60%, higher voter turnout, about 40%, lowest voter turnout, about 25%. That's the information we considered in the subcommittee.
Great. Thank you both for the clarifications. And now Member Davis.
Thank you. Since legal action has, a threat of legal action has been implied, just for the record, I'm not thinking about who votes at all. I feel confident in making the assertion that I understand the demographics of the city. I'm at least in the top 10 within the city. I've gone through the 2020 census tract by tract and so on. And this has never entered my mind on who votes in which elections. I do think that it's very instructive and entirely appropriate to consider overall turnout. I have my own bias for higher turnout elections. I want more people to be voting, as many people voting as possible. So I'm willing to endure some pain, even some controversy, to make sure that we get to an election with high turnout. The state I grew up in, Texas, just had an election in an off year where they put in a number of constitutional amendments. That's not the way we want to go. I find that one of the many ways that state is misrun. So I think it's worth some pain to get to an election where we're confident that we'll have higher voter turnout. Simultaneously, I'm skeptical of appointed council members, and I would hope that our council would appoint persons who are very restrained in demeanor and in action. And I feel pretty confident in the voters of Sunnyvale to elect council members who would not appoint a radical. That's, our elections have been pretty straightforward, and our council functions without rancor, with a few exceptions in my nearly 20 years here. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Wickham.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm with the subcommittee that statements made by committee member Rubino in terms of council members, I just want to confirm council members will still have the option and ability to choose a special election depending on the situation. Is that correct?
Member Newswanger.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Anything else from the committee? Any requests to consider changes to the report or the recommendation? Any requests for a straw poll? I'm taking silence as support for the report as written. Great job. Yeah. So I think, with that, staff has this report and can move forward. So we will close this item. Thank you very much, everyone. And now we'll move on to the next agenda item, number 3, file number 25-1056, discuss and provide feedback on subcommittee draft report regarding city council compensation. Again, no staff report. Is there a subcommittee report? Member Davis.
There is. I have it before me. I didn't bring a hard copy. I'll just walk through it very quickly, and I don't want to drain each page. Since it is in the record, there's no need to read it. But essentially, we looked at this, as a larger issue. The compensation of publicly elected officials always comes up, right? And there have been a number of charter measures over the years to actually change this, right? So since in 2011, 1992, and here we are again looking at it again in 2025. Now, a little bit of background. The last time this was modified was in 2011 with Measure B. I was in the city at this point, so I do recall it, and it was a pretty simple measure that just capped salary that tied council salary increases to inflation and capped it at 5%. Prior to that, it was it increased 5% annually, right? In the ballot measure itself, it said that the salaries were set in 1992, and that the numbers that they used that came from the state mandated salaries for public law city council salaries, as it was in 1992, and then it increased 5% annually. I found it odd that we would tie it to, I'm sorry, what are they called? Public law city salaries, as mandated by the state. It's not, my knowledge of the scope of public law cities is not expansive, but our closest neighbors, the scope of city operations is significantly smaller than Sunnyvale's is, right? And our cities that have similar scope to us are all charter cities. So I just don't understand, at least in 2025, I don't think there's a good argument for Sunnyvale to adopt salaries tied to Sacramento mandated salaries for public law cities. Moving on to what we actually considered. The reason why we're talking about this is that wages and costs in Sunnyvale have expanded well in excess of inflation over the last 14 years. Certainly wages have, housing costs have as well, right? And so we find that there's just a gap, right? So we narrowed in on a couple of 3 options for this. But first, let's talk about the American Community Survey. Because of its size, there's actually a little more data published about Sunnyvale than for some of our neighboring cities. It's not because we're awesome, though we are. It's just because of our size. One of the figures is, and I'll go ahead and give you the column name. It's S2001_C01_013E. This is the median wage for full-time employed residents of Sunnyvale. This is a wage, not an income. So if people were to have passive income, that wouldn't be included in this, and so on. This is included in both the 1-year and 5-year ACSs. And we included a table to show you how the 1-year bounces around and how the 5-year has a much smaller standard error. We also have the mean, which is, the average that everybody is used to. We don't like that as much. You can go do a YouTube search and you can find all kinds of things that'll tell you why median is better than mean for all of this. But intuitively, $181,000 as the average wage in Sunnyvale actually feels pretty right to me. The median being a little bit lower at somewhere in the $150,000 range. Yeah, I have no reason to doubt that, right? I think we probably have a lot of lower wage earners that are pulling that down quite a bit. So the options that we came to were one is just to re-index the compensation numbers in section 605 to specific numbers that just reflect the economic reality. In this option, we're not talking about how to do that. We just pulled numbers that kind of fit into this from the survey responses of $60,000 and $90,000 annually. There's not much methodology behind that other than kind of, licking your finger and sticking it in the air. The survey seems like these are acceptable numbers. Another way, option 2, would be to index the council and mayoral compensation to 50% and 75% of the median income. And we go into in that column that I mentioned. Using the 2023 5-year ACS, that would be annual wages of $71,360.50 for city council and $107,040.75 for the mayor. This, and you just tie this every year. There are some weaknesses with the American Community Survey that before I talk about option 3 that I should point out. One, they change all the time. They actually change somewhat more dramatically about the year after you get a new administration. I work with statistics a lot. I know how to do that. And you can do that and still be within and still be acceptably rigorous. Let's put it that way. But politics are played with how we calculate things all the times, right? The other thing is that what they actually publish changes pretty consistently. There could be another statistic come up that would be more appropriate. And finally, especially with government shutdowns, when they're published is kind of erratic. So I kind of counsel against actually tying our city charter to the American Community Survey. And that leads us to option 3, which is the one I like it the best, which is basically we take the ACS, those are the best numbers we have. We set the numbers as we said in option 2, and put those numbers into the charter. I would like City Council to look at establishing a review committee that would meet maybe once every 10 years or whenever they should set the time. That would, and very quickly reset those numbers, right? Perhaps by ordinance. We didn't venture into what the language would look like. None of the 3 of us are attorneys. So didn't want to mess with that. And that's what we came up with. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that oral report and also for the written report. It's very thorough and thoughtful. So let's go to Member Olofsson.
Thank you. And I do agree that was a well-written report. My concern is you said the ACS survey is erratically done. And if we were to accept your option 3, do you think that the current data is current?
Let me think how I want to say this. The ACS are the best figures you're going to find that are specific to Sunnyvale. There, you could call it the gold standard, but it wouldn't be 24 karat. But this is just, you have to use something, and the ACS is your best choice.
Thank you. That's what I felt, that's what I was reading in your report. And I do think setting it fixed at some point in time, and then indexing it to a widely used index like the CPI is a good way to go forward. And I'm relatively certain that in some future time, the then council will say it's time to revisit this and let's look at it again. But anyway, thank you for your report. I thought very understandable and well written.
Member Vickery.
First, I have a question which I think I know the answer to, but I just want to, it may be so obvious it's not worth answering. But since this is the 2023 ACS, the likely median salary today is a little bit higher because of inflation, correct?
Potentially. Being someone who works in tech who's had to administer salaries for highly educated people, I would, yeah, it's likely higher. Also, I would say that with our increase in minimum wage and so on, so the bottom has probably come up. So I would anticipate that it's 3 to 5% higher for 2024 per year. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm really delighted that the answer wasn't as obvious, because then there was a reason to ask the question. So my concern is more a process concern. If I were sitting on city council, this would be the issue that I would find most difficult to deal with for obvious reasons. If we present 3 options where the council then is picking among the options, are we putting the council in the position of being accused of picking the option that produces the highest salary for them, as opposed to our exercising our judgment as to what the best option is and putting that to the city council? They would presumably have a report that could report on other options that were considered. But I wonder if it wouldn't be, I don't know that the word fairer, I wonder if we wouldn't be doing our job a little better if we were to actually put forth the option that we thought was best for Sunnyvale.
Yeah, and I invite my other subcommittee members to chime in. What I failed to say, though it's written there, is that the recommendation is that a professional polling be done on this issue. It's such a sensitive topic that I'm personally reluctant to make a strong proposal at this point without public polling. I don't have a good feel for where the public would be on this. So I would like to see specific language used by professional pollsters to better gauge the public opinion.
Yeah, back to Member Vickery.
That also is an answer I wasn't expecting. So again, I really appreciate it. And I would suggest that the report then emphasize that a bit more than this does. I mean, it lists professional polling as something that would be done, but even a person who reads and somewhat understands what you're getting at here I did not pick up on the point that you would like to better gauge what the public might think about these options before one is selected. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Member Wee.
I'd also like to point out the options that we came up with are all in kind of the same ballpark. I mean, it's a big change from where it is currently. And so we wanted to give council some latitude on its sense of how things were going. Because ultimately they do have to make the decision what they want to put on the ballot. It's not up to, we can make our recommendations, and we came up with 3. With the third one was, we felt with, at least I also agree with Committee Member Davis, that one felt the best of the ones we had. But the other 2 are other options that were on the table also. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up that question, because I actually had the same question, that I'd really like the committee to try to coalesce around a single preferred option, even if we have some others like as fallbacks, but really the best option the option that we support the most, given the information that we have, and understanding that we don't have the results of professional polling. And I think that would be really good to call out very clearly and have some more language in the report about the need for polling on this. But I really think that council is looking to this committee to come up with what we think is the best option going forward. And I can just, putting myself in council shoes, it's sort of like, let's say at work and HR says, okay, we have these 3 different ways we can calculate your salary next year. Which way should we use? And I'd be like, okay, let me pull out my calculator and get back to you. I don't want to put council in that position. I understand that, at the end of the day, it's really the voters who decide. And council will certainly do polling to get a sense of where the voters are. And it is good to give council some other ideas that they can think about. But I think council is really looking to this committee to try to do the challenging work of figuring out, like, balancing all the considerations, which option do we land on as the preferred one at this point. So I don't want to get too far into advocacy just yet, because we haven't heard from the public. But I did want to tag on to the conversation we were starting to have, and also give the public a chance to weigh in on that before we deliberate, or move towards consensus. Great. Okay, so let's go to Vice Chair Wickham, followed by Member Vickery.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand a little bit the thinking behind the 3 different columns, and like, is that because you didn't have other data, or that was basically told the picture that you wanted to convey? So I see 1-year ACS for 2024, 1-year ACS for 2023, and then 5-year ACS for 2023. And I'm assuming that 5 years means 2023 inclusive and going back 5 years. Is that correct?
Okay. So the Census Bureau has basically 2 ACS products, right? So the 1-year ACS is based on 1 year's worth of samples, right? It's a sample, right? So the 2024 1-year ACS will be based on just the sample that they did in 2024, and then so on for 2023. The 5-year ACS is based on a 5-year sample. I'd have to look up to see if it's just the last 5 1-year samples with perhaps some smoothing done on the distinct on the methodology. That's also something, the adjustments, and there's a range of adjustments that you would make from year to year that would be entirely appropriate, right? That would be applied to it. We'd be really getting down into the weeds on it. But the short answer is, I put the table in to show that the 1 year bounces all over the place. And the 5 year is more stable. We do have a number of council members who do know what standard error is, and so they'll look at that and understand what that means as well, right?
Yeah, staff.
Sorry. So wanted to make one comment. In my years of municipal law, I have had half a dozen or so instances of a provision policy that references an index, and that index has gone away or it's changed. So I think it would be helpful to get some direction from the committee on, and so I'm particularly concerned about it in a charter because charters are hard to change. So, normally when I'm working with departments on policies, I'll put in, this or successor index. That's also very hard to predict with the ACS. With anything census right now, I think. So it would be helpful to get some direction from the committee. The easiest thing to do is probably to pick a number, and you could pick your number based on this, and that's fine. But actual references to this particular index and, thinking 50 years in the future, what if this index ceases to exist? It would be helpful to get some direction from the committee on what do we do then. So.
Thank you. Good points to ponder. And good experience to draw on. Member Vickery, followed by Member Rubino.
I think Member Wee makes a very good point that if I'm doing the math right, and that's a big if, 150% increase from the current to option one will be controversial enough. But I still think that if we put the council in the position of choosing between that and another option that's even 20% higher than that, I find that to be putting the council in an uncomfortable position.
Member Rubino.
Yeah, what, did you consider other indices other than this one? Do other ones exist?
Yeah, short answer is yes. Over time, we've looked at the numbers that are used for affordable housing, which is basically a county-wide number. We didn't like that because we're a more expensive part of the county is the bottom line, right? The northern parts of the county are significantly more expensive than the southern parts. And you don't have to go that much further south than we are to see prices, cost of living decline pretty dramatically in the double digits.
And my concern is also the longevity. What we did in the MOU is we use CPI, not COLA. We use CPI, and we have specific language that if the CPI goes away, it's got to be the next index that the government uses. So I understand the concern about the South versus the North, but it's still a lot more than what the city council's making right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think my preference, and I know I'm not on your subcommittee, is that it be more of a localized index that probably will hang around a lot longer. Or either
Okay.
California data or county data.
Yeah, I think where we were kind of coalescing was option 3 was where we set the number based on this data, which is uh, which is the best data that can be found, right? But not putting that into the charter, not putting, this could be in the ballot language, but not in the charter, that we would be tied to this.
Well, could you all, I'm sorry, am I talking out of turn when I talk?
I've been letting the conversation go pretty freeform because I think that's where we are. So yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
Because my question would be, is there some way that you could put it into an ordinance or a statute and have the language in the charter be more open-ended and have the council come up with an ordinance that makes it more specific, and that could be changed as stuff changes?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're saying in option 3, was to have a body meet periodically that would evaluate the numbers
Okay.
that's in the
okay.
charter and perhaps reset it. For actual charter language, obviously we'd need the city attorney's help in getting the language just right. My thinking is that we don't want this to have to be to make an adjustment in the base. My initial take is we don't want that to need to be a charter review committee. That seems like a very expensive way to do something that's relatively administrative. But we want pretty strong language that would essentially keep city council from setting its own salary. I am thinking a little bit off the top of my head here, so I know I didn't write down quite that much, but yeah, that's where my head is right now. Other subcommittee members feel free to disagree with me or agree to.
All right, okay, we'll go back to Member Rubino and then we'll go to Member Olafson.
Okay. My only suggestion would be is to look and see if there's other charters that are along your number 3 path. That there's some kind of index or number that goes in the charter and then specifies that it goes into a review committee and into an ordinance kind of thing.
Oh, that is something I do know about because
Okay.
I
Thanks.
did download 121 of the 123. But Pasadena is the closest in that they have a committee that sets it periodically. I don't remember the exact details, but we would be breaking new ground here. There's not any consistency in how this is done across the cities at all. There's been no copy and paste for this.
Okay, and with that, we'll go to Member Olafson, followed by Member Wee.
Thank you, Chair. As I hear the discussion revolving around, I'm concerned that if we leave it too open-ended or even a little open-ended, we'll end up with the council being perceived and in fact able to set their own pay. I strongly recommend against that. I think the option presented in 3 of setting a fixed wage salary at a time certain when the charter amendment passes, and then indexing that to a CPI, we've got that adds certainty to what's going on so that the public and, well, first, the council doesn't have to argue. It's best if we set our pay by ordinance. So they choose their own pay. That's, I think, is bad policy. And secondly, I think the electors would be much more inclined to say, okay, here's what I'm going to pay. And I agree to let it index with the CPI, preferably with a cap on it, so we don't have a couple of years where the CPI runs to 9% and then drops back down. And now we've got people paid much better than the electors are used to. So I would recommend the committee consider making their final report say the option 3 is the one we recommend. And here is the dollar specific we're looking at. And here's the particular CPI, because as Member Davis knows, there's a CPI for every little nook and cranny in the United States. And we want to make sure we get one that is for the South Bay metropolitan area. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to get to, because we're starting to get into advocacy, I'd like to get to the public very soon. So if you have a clarifying question, this would be the time. Otherwise, if you have advocacy, I'd ask you to hold on to that until we hear from the public as well. So we'll go to Member Wee, followed by Member Vickery.
This is more answering from the committee's perspective. 1 and 3 are very similar. We just set a salary and then nothing else in the charter changes. We leave the same language as exists now to adjust by CPI. So we just established a new baseline. Number 1 was mainly based on the survey, kind of round numbers, pop those in there, versus 3 was set it more precisely to the median salary percentages. And then, but again, just use the language that's currently in the charter, unchanged. We just set the new number. 2 is sort of the wild card thing, was and now that I've heard more from staff about what that entails and how delicate that could be, it even more solidifies our tendency to go toward 3 as an option. And I'd very be interested after we get public comment, maybe doing a straw poll and just get a sense from the committee where people are trending on this.
Thank you. Member Vickery.
This is a clarifying question because I'm now fairly confused about option 3. From what Member Wee just said, my understanding is that option 3 would still include specific dollar figures. Those would have been calculated in the manner that option 2 calculated figures, but option 3 would include specific figures that would then be tied to inflation. So am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
And then if you then established a review committee to evaluate and adjust wage figures that are in the charter, would you not then be creating a charter review committee?
Yeah, I
mean,
suppose
admittedly,
like
with
if
very
we,
limited scope, but
yeah,
still.
I suppose it would have, I would probably call it a compensation committee or something like that, right? But yeah, it would be changing. Perhaps we're not changing the verbiage of the charter, but like we're effectively changing the numbers. I'm hoping that there's a way to do this without having to go onto the ballot. And perhaps there's some legal advice advising if that's possible. Would there be a way to have a number in the charter, but that would be revised in the future by perhaps an appointed body? You see what I'm saying? Does that de facto mean that the changes have to go before the voters because you're essentially changing the number in the charter?
I think I was going to comment on this later, actually, but you're talking about the sentence that it says explore establishing a review committee every 10 years to evaluate and adjust the wage figures. Yes. I would need a lot more detail. So I think what you would need to do if you wanted, I think what you would need to do is actually establish provisions in the charter stating what that group is, how it's formed, how many people, what their purview is. what they're meant to look at, so that the charter is giving defined authority and establishing what they're meant to evaluate, and then giving them the authority to make that change or somehow establishing that authority. Sometimes it's, a review committee evaluates it and recommends to the council. Sometimes charters establish review bodies that actually have the authority to make that determination. So it would need to be a pretty detailed description of what that body looks like and what their authority is, what their purview is, and what they're supposed to be looking at and what they have the authority to change or recommend change on, if that makes sense.
If I may, having drafted statutes and taught drafting, what was just suggested can absolutely be done. I mean, it's possible to draft it, and the numbers you would be putting in initially would be designated as numbers that apply initially. And then all of the authority and all would be specified with, with the authority to then change those numbers going forward. And that then would not require a charter amendment.
And before we go any further with the brainstorming, I'd like to open the public hearing and hear from the public. So with that, I will open the public hearing on this item. Please submit a speaker card to the city clerk, raise your digital hand now, or dial *9 on telephone to indicate you wish to speak. The city clerk will call on members of the public participating in person first, followed by remote participants. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. City clerk, do we have any in-person participants wishing to speak on this item?
Yes, Chair. We have Zachary K. followed by Steve S. Zachary, please approach the lectern. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
I would like to affirm serving as a council member is a heck of a lot of work. Serving as mayor is even more. Most of us in the room were and are in tech. A high salary is perceived as a reflection of skill and effort. The rest of the world doesn't necessarily work that way. Just to pick an example, a friend in high school, through countless hours of effort and innate ability, could play nearly anything on the piano. He went on to get a master's degree in it. He ended up moving to Japan, teaching a few students and English lessons to get by. Likewise, I can think of occupations that get overly paid for what they do. With respect to other strong city manager council governments around here, the city council and mayor are not hugely underpaid. Dramatically increasing the council and mayor's salaries relative to surrounding municipalities will make Sunnyvale a magnet for those seeking office and a political career to the detriment of simply people that wish to serve their community. Rather than getting engineers, scientists, project managers, retired public safety members, etc., you will find a council filled with people who majored in government and don't know much else. A number of years ago, I had the experience of sitting through parts of San Jose City Council meeting. Their council members are highly paid. The mental level of their discourse didn't correlate with their salary. Perhaps the salary level optimized for something different than Sunnyvale's. Basing a salary off some arbitrary level of the ACS in a region that is highly populated by tech workers as a methodology is flawed. Overly inflated council salaries relative to surrounding communities will modify the council makeup, veering it towards career politicians. That little fact needs to be kept in mind.
Next, we have Steve. Steve, please approach the lectern. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Up there. Some suggestions to look at here for compensation. Sunnyvale operates under a council management government, and we also utilize professional staff. Council and mayor are part-time and should not be considered livelihood or career roles. Okay. Job descriptions for council and mayor do not really exist in detail. And there is no specific experience or skills required other than to get elected. Okay. I will echo some of the points to the previous speaker, is that we have already seen an example, and I can think of 3, that are people without the skills other than taking a government class. Okay. No specific experience, no annual or biannual mechanisms exist to evaluate council member and mayor performance. To tell us, well, just vote them out. No, that's not acceptable at all. Okay. Public may not agree with the self-identified responsibility and time estimates that are being given. So there's a couple of questions here. Should the city staff be tasked with reducing the demands on the council? Okay. My personal opinion is council members are too chatty. Staff is too chatty, and they're invited to too many meetings. Okay, we've got professional staff. I hope you're compensated adequately for what you need. And we have a highly compensated city manager. So I don't think we have to have 7 people go to all those meetings. I think the workload should be more like 15 to 20 maximum for a council member and 20 to 25. Cupertino General Law City versus Charter City has no bearing on the compensation model at all, okay? Not at all. Page 3, council and mayor actually or apparent preparation varies widely, okay? Anecdotally, people have talked about council members, some you've brought up in your meetings here, who did virtually no preparation at all. 1,000 pages, yeah, I can flip through them, but I'm not going to even scan them. I'm just going to go to the executive summary on those things. Council and mayor engagement with intergovernmental meetings varies widely. Some of the council members enjoy doing those things. Council pay, I've got some numbers here, not going to read through all of them, but what you're suggesting right now is 1.6 salary increase in method 1 for a council and 1.8 for a mayor, and in method 2, maybe it's off from your number 3 versus number 2. 1.9 versus 2.15. That's a big jump. You know, that's a big jump. So I'm going to look at a professional manager here. I have a professional manager. We need to have the benefits in here. Total salary with benefits, base, overtime, other, and then they break out the benefits. This is a professional manager who has 10 years of experience in multiple fields. Okay, and they're being broken out. So certainly we should have tables. And our report needs a table, all of these calculations, and needs a table that calls out all those benefits, which in this particular case was different than a Sunnyvale, but it is a municipality. It's about 19% is the benefit rate on there. We may be higher. Thank you.
Chair, that was the final in-person speaker wishing to speak on this agenda item.
Thank you. Now we go to remote speakers. Remote speakers are warned to limit their comments to the agenda item being considered. Speakers who are ruled out of order will not be given another chance to speak on this item. This is for agenda item 25-1056. City Clerk, do we have any remote participants wishing to speak on this item?
No, Chair.
Thank you. With that, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the committee for further discussion and straw polls. I just wanted to jump in with a couple comments because I've been pretty quiet. Let's see. So I very much like the idea of resetting the baseline, but then sticking with the current indexing method that we have, not changing what index that we use, but just considering a new number as a new baseline. And even though CPI may not keep up with the economic reality in the community, it will be close for at least a while, and perhaps then down the road, the voters will need to take another look at that point. And the complexity of the city also changes over time. And so there could be reasons, even if we pick a different index, to still have a charter update in a number of years. Regarding having a review committee, I think there would need to be substantial language in the charter since the voters would be delegating their authority to a committee. And as a voter, I'd want to know the details before I vote on that. And it feels to me like we're trying to get a report ready for council very soon. And there are some very significant policy considerations that we would have to go through. I'm not sure that we're at a point in our process where we can actually go through all that. We don't even have the concrete details in front of us. The one that I think is the trickiest is, how do the committee members get appointed? Who does the appointing? And if council is choosing them, then even though that it's somewhat arm's length from the council, it's still council picking them. And it's not as disinterested of a process as I might hope to have. So I think just given the complexity of considering those policy questions, I'm not sure that we can actually go down that path at this point. That could almost be a separate charter committee on its own to work through all those details. I think, it's a great brainstorming idea. And I'm just thinking about other similar, like, public committees that are chosen to do other important tasks, and just how convoluted some of those appointment processes get to try to prevent special interests from affecting the process. So in my mind, there are two questions on the table. One is, if we're going to propose a new baseline, what is that baseline? And two, if we're going to change the annual index, which index? I like the idea of staying with the index we have already. I can appreciate using something like the ACS as a starting point, although the percentage of the ACS that we pick is still sort of, what's the methodology behind picking that percentage? And really, as a voter, I'm going to look at the actual dollar number that's being proposed as a baseline. And I just have to say, personally, I think $60,000 is, for a council member, is probably closer to the mark and more likely to be supported by the voters than the 71,000, et cetera. That's 50% of the ACS. That's my gut feel. Other people in the community may have different opinions, and that's why council would need to do polling. But anyway, that's sort of where I'm landing for the council member salary. So wanted to put that out there. And I know there is interest in the review committee, but I don't think we're really going to be able to give that the discussion it merits tonight and still get a report together for December. So with that, go to the committee. We have a lot of interest in expressing opinions. So Member Davis, followed by Member Newswanger.
I agree with you, Chair. Coming up with the framework, we could probably come up with a workable framework for appointing some kind of 10-year calibration committee. Getting through the appropriate level of review to put it before City Council, I think we're out of time on that. I'm skeptical of the idea of us attracting potential career politicians, although that doesn't really bother me. I'd love to see a governor eventually who came up through Sunnyvale. But aside from that, I tend to trust our voters. And if you don't have roots within the city, I think our voters will see through you. If you don't come here and develop a base of community support, even if you're coming in from the outside, Well, if you can still get elected, then the city differs from what all of our perspectives are in this room, right? The cities, we're probably the ones out of touch with the city. One idea that I've had that I haven't really shared was, because I'm very sensitive to the idea that council members shouldn't be setting their own salaries. And so a clause I've played around with in my head was that this would not apply until the next election. Until the next. So if you get a second term, then you come in the new salary, but your current term, the rest of your term, you're stuck with the salaries as they are right now. And we could work out the language for that, right? But I'd love to hear what the rest of the committee thinks about that. But that's something I've it's bothered me, late at nights or, as you're getting ready for work and so on, that like, I don't want it. I just don't want the public to perceive that council members are giving themselves a raise. And so that's one idea of maybe a way to balance away from that. As to the numbers themselves and so on, I don't. I don't want to call council members from other jurisdictions perhaps less sophisticated or less intelligent than our own council members, yeah. Definitely lots of occupations don't pay fairly. That's why my kids are not going to become professional musicians, though they're internationally acclaimed, right? Because they can make more as a software engineer right out of college than somebody who's the best trombone player in the world. So that's just the world we live in. I'm not comfortable saying that like council member is less valued than a software engineer. And it's not easy to get elected. It requires a particular skill set. And I am, look, somebody who managed to get themselves elected gets my respect, even if I don't like them. It's hard. So thank you.
Member Newswanger, followed by Member Vickery.
We've heard that increasing salaries would attract career politicians and have potentially negative consequences. So I have a question for the subcommittee and also staff. Do we have any evidence for that?
And yeah, staff.
We can go back and look to see, it would be your definition of a career politician, right? What does that look like? So there's a lot of variables and different ways you could respond to that question. Have we had council members that start as council members and move on to, Board of Supervisors or state office? Off the top of my head, a few. But again, how do you define what is a career politician and how many that is? We'd have to do a little bit of research and really understand what your definition of a career politician is.
I guess it could be politicians from out of town would be a better measure. But anyway, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and also like what baseline are you comparing against? Would be
Yeah. Well, I knew we heard the statement, and I just wonder what the evidence is.
Yeah. All right, we'll go to Member Vickery, followed by Member Wee.
So I have a question for Chair Larson and then a comment on the clause that Chair Davis is contemplating. My question for Chair Larson is, when you say you would keep the current method of adjustments, would you keep the 5% cap as well?
Probably simply because it's there.
Yeah.
And I'm just reducing the number of changes.
Yeah, I assume that. So on the clause that you're thinking about, one might, I'm not suggesting this wording because I think it could be worded better, but the 27th Amendment of the United States Constitution reads, no law varying the compensation for the services of senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. So what you're thinking about has pretty well-respected precedent.
Okay, Member Wee, followed by Member Rubino.
I like to keep things simple, so I like the idea of just resetting the baseline, leaving the rest of the language as is. It's interesting to think of having an appointed committee set up, but that's just too complicated. That is a lot of work to put that together and figure that out. It's too much. So keeping it simple, figuring out what the new baseline is. I still like the idea of getting the council maybe a couple of options, like maybe the 60-90 and then the adjust to the ACS 50-75%. Just leave it at that and see which way they want to go for that. They're close enough, and they're not choosing their own salary. They're choosing what's going in the ballot, but the voters do decide that's fair or not. And then the voters are setting the salary. So we're coming up with recommendations. The council then will figure out which way they want to go. I do like keeping it simple, and that's where I'm currently, my head is at. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Rubino.
Yeah, I think the odd thing in Sunnyvale is that, and I didn't know what city staff made until it was published on the website. And it's like, I think it's just so odd that our city manager makes like 300 and something $1,000 and our mayor makes like 40. It's like, I think there could be, and I know this is really goofy and off left field, is you take the median salary of the city employee and see what that is, and then make that equal to the mayor's salary. I mean, I just hypothetically, because I think what's so interesting, and I hate to say this, but it's pretty funny, is I would never have considered a career in city government. But if you look at the salaries that cities pay in this area, it's like astronomical in my point of view, because I'm so old. But you can make a really nice living working for the city. And I'm not suggesting anything about, I'm not being, differential that I know you guys work your butts off and it's a hard job and all that other stuff. But, talking about professional politicians, you have professional staff that works for the city for years and years and years. I mean, look at Trudy. She's been here like a gazillion years. In my mind, she's a national treasure. And most of you people who work for the city are fabulous. And you stay because you get great benefits. And I think, the heck with, I know we have term limits, but if we expect people to serve our city in a elected office, I think we need to pay them a good wage, even though some of them have, or all of them have other jobs. I think they need to be compensated. And it's so funny that you have Tim making, $370,000 and you have the mayor making like 40. It's like, it's just weird. You know what I mean? But anyway, those are my 2 cents worth. Thanks.
Member Vickery, followed by Member Wee.
I messed it up, sorry. Someone who knows more about this should correct me, but my understanding is that we set a poverty line here that's about 60,000 because of the cost of living. I think it doubles the national figure and comes out to about 60. It seems to me that if we chose that figure and we could then explain that as used in this area, that would be the poverty line for a family of 4, that would really help with the idea that we're paying a wage that's going to attract professional politicians to our full-time professional politicians. Another thing that makes sense to me And maybe it's because I came from a state where justices of the Supreme Court were paid X amount of money, and the Chief Justice, with whom I worked very closely when I was Dean of the Law School, was paid $2,000 more when he did at least twice as much as the other justices. To me, once we move to a city elected mayor, citywide elected mayor, it would make more sense not to put that in as a figure, but to put that in as a multiplier of the council member salary. So the language would set the council member and then would specify that the mayor gets X percent more. That would make more sense to me in terms of the way the job is done than to plug in a figure. But that might not be politically wise to do. But to me, it just makes more sense. So that would be something that I would like us to think about at least.
Member Wee.
I forgot to mention a few other things. I still think even with these new salaries, they're still underpaid because council and mayor is a ton of work that very few people will be able to do well and put up with the amount of attention and abuse sometimes that they get. So I think they need to be paid well for what they're doing for our city and at least reasonably. Also, I'm not worried about benefits because most people look at salary, they understand there's benefits associated with it, and they're looking at the base salaries with any job they get. So not including the benefits in it is not an issue for me, showing what their total compensation is. And finally, we have this notion that it's not good to be professional for some reason in our country, which really concerns me. I'm okay with a professional politician if they do a good job. They do a good job for their constituents. And I'm just looking for performance based on how they perform, whether or not they choose that to make the profession or not. So that does not weigh in for me at all. And I just want people who do a respectable job and do it professionally. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Davis.
Thank you. So I wanted to maybe bring this back a little bit, that part of our goals or part of the reasons that we're looking at this is to encourage more candidates, right? And one of the hypotheses is that it is such a demanding job that if you're working full time, if you do a minimally competent job and you only work 40 hours a week, which, I suppose some people are able to work only 40 hours a week. That's happened, a couple of times in my career. You're sacrificing career advancement if you're a city council member with the amount of time that you have to spend on it. Frankly, in a hiring decision, a city council member comes before me. What I know now, it's not going to be so good for them. When I will try to set it aside, but I know how demanding it is and so on. So higher wages could allow somebody to perhaps maybe at the margin, some people who are like, maybe I can make the sacrifice of slowing my career down for a few years. I can. So it's not just a comparable thing. I think higher wages for our council members would open up, would allow a larger portion of the electorate or potential candidates to consider it. Me personally, right now, I don't want to be a city council member anyway. I don't like the ceremonial stuff, but someone hit me on the head and I was thinking about it. Like, no, I can't. I'd have to sacrifice so much at work. I'm not going to be the kind of performer that I am. I'd need to get demoted a couple of times before I'd consider it. So you know, but it could open up where somebody who would go to maybe 3/4 time at their work or something like that, right? That they're willing to make that sacrifice while they can still make their mortgage. And I think that still fully applies to the idea that this is public service then. You are making a large sacrifice. But this is such an expensive place to live that it's just, you know, if you don't have a very strong career, you can't afford to live here right now when you're in your working ages. Prop 13 and other things do allow people to stay here for longer and so on. But also at the same time, you know, you become a little bit isolated from the working world and the realities of the city and what it costs to live here, to be a professional here, to raise children here. You're further removed from that. So I think that there's the potential for this to raise the pool, to increase the size of the pool of the candidates and simultaneously get more of the, I'll say, the highly competent public people who live in Sunnyvale to make city council accessible to them. I feel like we've gotten bogged down on the details of this and we've forgotten about that a little bit. And I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I was starting to think the same thing. Yeah, why are we doing this? Okay. While we wait to see if there are any other comments, I just wanted to comment on the notion of when this might take effect. I think it could be problematic if we raise the salaries for some council members and not others at the same time, but we could say or propose that it takes effect at the time, like after the following election, so in 2 years, because this is a more substantial jump. And then at that point, all the council members will have either been, well, I guess you had the newly, anyway, it just seems to be a more equitable way to phase it in. But I think there's merit in considering not just doing the jump right away, but perhaps putting it out there a little bit farther in time, give the electorate a chance to weigh in on candidates in the next election. Member Vickery.
As proof that the language of the 27th Amendment isn't wonderful, that's exactly what the 27th Amendment does. It makes it go into effect after the next election of the House of Representatives. So it obviously applies differently to senators with 6-year terms, but so theirs would increase even though they were only partway into their term. But that's what that language of the 27th Amendment actually does.
Great, thank you. Any, let's see, other comments from the committee, requests for straw polls. We do want to get a report back for our consideration at the December meeting. So I would like to coalesce as a committee on what changes we want to see in this report. I could see, you know, having stated my preference for a particular number, I could see giving council perhaps like a range of numbers that we think that this is about the right number. We can justify it several different ways, whether it's the poverty level, looking at ACS, what we think would be acceptable to the community based on the survey that we did. There are a number of ways to sort of support the numbers, but really at the end of the day, I think a specific number has to go on the ballot and people will either be comfortable with that or not. And I think if we can give council like 60 to 70,000 is a pretty tight range that that if we can settle at least on a range, that would be really helpful. I think I'm also hearing general support for keeping the current indexing method. If anyone feels strongly about that, please speak up. But certainly in the interest of keeping things simple, I think that would be a lot easier to explain to the voters and to council. So we'll go to Member Davis.
I'd love to hear, to see a straw poll on the timing language on when this would go into effect. And then my preference would be to put a specific number by the end of the next meeting before it goes to council instead of a range. But I'd love to see a straw poll on, I should say, on the idea that a council member would not be paid this until they are elected, and that could be reelected. So.
Okay, and just to, I want to clarify what we're pulling, because I think you were saying that it applies per council member, and I had suggested maybe just it changes for the whole council in 2 years. So, and want to make clear what we'd be doing the straw polling on. Oh, sorry. There we go.
No, I pushed the button. Yeah, my preference is that that it doesn't all go in at once. It goes in with your district's next election. I don't feel that strongly on it, though. I just feel like I don't want anyone to be able to accuse council members of voting themselves a pay raise. If you think you're voting themselves a pay raise, don't vote for them, right? And they don't benefit.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying. So let's see, we had a couple requests to speak. Are these on the straw poll? Oh, let me go to staff.
Thank you, Chair. Just for a clarification, as you're getting ready to do your straw poll and thinking about timing, one of the things that I want the committee to understand or be aware of is that, the city has to publish a salary schedule for council and employees. And so you just want to make sure that that is, it might prove very difficult to if you're staggering districts or, different times. So I think from staff's perspective, we'd like some real clarity and recommend that you probably do it all at once, just because it'd be very hard to administer, track those different salaries for the different districts. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Member Wee.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for staff. If it was having a time delay, would that need the language need to go into the charter? Could that just be in the ballot measure about when the charter changes effective as?
I think it would be in the charter language. And so, if you picked an election date, we would just say beginning with the 2028 election or whatever date, whatever election.
But that would actually be in the charter.
It should be in the charter for clarity, because the charters are law. So we're going to start following it as soon as it becomes effective. So that would be the clearest thing to do.
Got it.
Yeah.
Given the numbers we're talking about, I'm not actually that worried about delaying it per se. It's not that much. And I just like keeping it simple. But that's my current perspective. Thank you.
Member Philly.
The numbers are all pretty much the same, right? It's 60 to 71, whether we're talking about the index or the different numbers. And then importantly, we're suggesting that there be professional polling that takes place. So we already know that the public is comfortable with the 60. So my suggestion is that we provide that range with the idea of doing polling to the council and see what the appetite is after the polling.
Okay. All right, and comment on the straw poll, Member Vickery.
It's actually a proposal of a specific straw poll on your suggestion of keeping the current index.
Okay, so we have one straw poll.
Okay,
that's
what
been
is the
proposed.
straw poll we're talking about right now?
So the straw poll we're
The
talking about
number?
is, no, what Member Davis talked about, that the increase would take effect
Gotcha. Okay,
for each individual council member when their district was next elected.
okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so straw poll on that proposal from Member Davis. All those who are in favor of, please raise your hand. So the proposal is that any change to this council salary or mayor salary through this charter change would take effect the next time that seat is up for election. Okay, so once again, all those in favor? Seeing two, all those opposed? All right, and any abstentions? I don't think so. Okay, so that was, please help me with the counting. It was something to two. 7 to 2. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's go to Member Rubino.
Okay, my question is that the vote was that you guys would have it immediately effect as opposed to the next election? Is that correct?
The proposal was to delay when it would take effect until each seat was next elected.
Okay, so a no meant no. So does that mean the no's want it to be immediate?
Not necessarily.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Just not supporting that specific proposal, but there could be another proposal or nothing. So, yeah. All right, let's go to Member Newswanger, followed by Member Wee.
I'd like to propose a straw poll that any salary increase would go into effect at the next election for all the council members.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that or advocacy? Member Olafson.
Just clarification, when you say the next election, this charter proposal presumably is going before the voters on the 2026 general election. Do you mean it would go into effect at the 2026 or on the 2028?
I meant 2 years after the election for that proposal, so it would be 2028.
Thank you.
And having discussed special versus general elections, thank you for saying 2 years. Because the next election, who knows, there could be a primary election or there could be a special other election. Then we're going down that path again. Okay, Member Philly.
So do we need to extrapolate out the math with this is the number and then it's increasing every year so that by the time 2028 comes around, it's at the correct amount?
That is a complication to consider.
Correct.
Yeah, straw poll on top of a straw poll. I'm having initially suggested the 2-year delay. I'm starting to think about those kind of complexities, and maybe it's just better to just say, nope, here's the number, it takes effect immediately. That's just how I'm leaning. Let's go to Member Wee.
I am leaning toward, it just takes effect. They're voting on it. It just takes effect. It's just cleaner, easier, no delay language. And I like keeping it simple. And we haven't, I believe, had this kind of language in our charter before for any of the increases that we had in the past. This is a bigger bump than we have had in the past, but I'm still seeing them as underpaid. So I want to get them compensated fairly sooner rather than later.
And I think the changes in the past were related to the index as opposed to changing the number. So it wasn't actually an immediate big bump to council salaries. So that could have been a difference maybe, but yeah, I'm coming down on keep it simple as well. Member Vickery.
Well, as I'm reading 605, and some of you who were here in 2012 may know more about this, I'm reading that the first paragraph that sets the amounts says commencing January 1, 2012. So it did specify a date, but I'm guessing that, well, I don't know how to guess how the January 1, 2012, I don't know when the vote was taken that said it, but it did set the date at the beginning, at the, 2012 calendar year.
Okay, Member Olafson may have some insight on this.
Yes, the date was chosen because that's when the new council people would be sworn in. And the CPI is easy. You can choose any month you want, but we thought January to January was keeping it simple. So and we said, okay, this is what the salary is, compensation is right now. We didn't change that, but just said going forward, it's going to adjust for CPI and adjust for, as long as it didn't go over 5% and not under 0%. That was the deal.
Okay, back to Member Vickery.
So what about a straw poll on the change commencing January 1 after the election?
So we did have a request for a 2-year delay.
Oh, we
still have
did?
to do that, yeah. So we still have to do that straw poll. And
Oh,
then
we
we'll-
did?
And then
Okay,
we can go
sorry.
to that one, yeah. Yeah, so. And I know I was the instigator of that one. Now I'm no longer supporting it, but sometimes we hear information that changes our minds and that's fine. And that's just me. Others may disagree. So, okay, all those in favor of any potential salary change being delayed for 2 years after the passage of a measure, please raise your hand if you're in support. Seeing one in support. Okay, all those who are opposed. 6, 8. Okay, I think I counted 1 support, 8 opposed. Okay, thank you for double checking me. And now we'll go to Member Vickery.
So a straw poll on commencing January 1 of the year after the election? Is that what happened before? There was an election in 2011? Got it. Okay.
And just a little nuance to check in with staff, because actually the new council members get seated at the first meeting after January 1. And I don't know if payroll was cleaner, if it takes effect when the new council terms take effect, which is a few days after January 1.
That would imply that the current system didn't work.
I don't know what the payroll system was last time.
We can check with HR on that. I'm not, usually we say something like the pay period including, but I honestly don't know how they do it for new council members, if it is actually January 1st.
Yeah, okay. And I realize I'm down in the weeds and this is just a general recommendation for tonight that we can certainly tweak later and council can even tweak later before putting it on the ballot.
And my suggestion of the straw poll on that is because it's the way it currently is in the charter. And
Okay.
that must have made sense to somebody at the time and probably would make more sense to voters than talking about pay periods. But-
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think we know what the intent is
Yeah.
and the sentiment is. So any comments on that proposal? Seeing none, let's vote in favor of the salary change taking effect at the January 1 after the election. All those in favor? Looks like everyone. I'll just ask anyone opposed and any abstentions. It is unanimous. Okay, that was clear. So we do Member Vickery.
I would like to suggest a straw poll on retaining the current cost of living adjustment, which is essentially, as I understand it, all of the current paragraph 2 in 605.
Okay. Any questions, advocacy on that? All right. All those in favor of keeping the current language on adjustments, please raise your hand. All right. Any opposed? One opposed. Any abstentions? No abstentions. Okay. 8-1. All right. And then we still have a question. We're getting very close. Thank you for this. This is great. A recommendation on a dollar figure, whether it's a specific number or a range, whatever is the committee's pleasure. I'd like to find out where committee members are at. So either comments or a specific request for a straw poll. Member Wee.
I propose a straw poll of giving them a range for council members of 60 to, call it 72,000, and for mayor, 90 to 107,000.
Thank you. Member Vickery.
Is it appropriate to comment on the question that's being put in the straw poll?
Absolutely, yes.
I have a problem with voting on a range as opposed to voting on a number. So I now am looking at a straw poll that asks me two things. Do I want a range? If so, is the range the right range? So I would like a straw poll that wouldn't be that confusing to me.
So back to
So
Member
you're
Wee.
suggesting just having a fixed number for each of those and pick one. And I'd actually be interested in hearing any other input before I actually finalize the straw poll. Is that acceptable?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll go back to Member Vickery, followed by Member Newswanger.
If your intention is that you would like it to be a range, I think you should propose that for the straw poll and just make it clear to us that we're voting for a range as well as voting for the numbers within the range. I may vote against it for either of those reasons, but if you want a range, I think you ought to propose a range like you did before I said something.
All right, Member Newswanger, followed by Member Davis.
I would suggest changing the straw poll to voting on should it be a range or not, and then later picking the numbers.
Member Davis.
I don't like taking a range to council because I think it's just going to be kind of unseemly for council to be debating numbers for their own compensation. That it'll just be a very bad look. That it'll feel like a little bit like an auction with parliamentary procedure, which is a very strange juxtaposition of words. So I just don't like ranges for that. I would prefer to take a number to them, and it's almost de facto take it or leave it. If they want to change it and so on, I'd rather them ring the bell for that and take themselves into that territory of debating actual numbers for their own compensation rather than us taking them to it. Thank you.
Vice Chair Wickham, followed by Member Wee.
Also, with respect to the range, we had talked about possibly having the mayor as a multiplier. So would it be, maybe that's a separate straw poll, but if the mayor is a multiplier, is the multiplier a range or is it a number?
And Member Wee.
Okay, having heard some input from folks, I'm inclined to go with a single number for council member and then having be a 50% increase for the mayor from the council members' established salary. And just to make things round, I'm saying 72,000 for the council members, and then whatever the calculation that ends up being for the mayor, that's, yeah, 50% more than that. Should be the 100, is that 108? Not doing math very well in my head.
So could you just repeat that so that I just quite didn't get all that?
A straw poll where the council member salary be proposed to be 72,000. And the mayor's salary would be 50% more than that number, which would then correspond to the 50 and 75% sort of thought process that our committee went through. I think that would be 108, I believe, if I did my math correctly in my head.
That's my arithmetic too.
Thank you.
Member Rubino.
Yeah, I think we're getting away from the report. So I'm getting a little confused here because we had a report that came up with stuff. And now it's like we're second guessing the report. And I guess I'm getting a little confused.
So the intention is that the committee will revise the report based on the feedback. The subcommittee will revise the report based on the feedback tonight. And so we're giving the subcommittee feedback on what direction to take the report.
Okay, I just find this like stabbing in the dark. Because it's not based on any index or anything, it's just numbers. I'm sorry, I couldn't support that. It has to be for me attached to some kind of index or something. Either median income in the city or in the county, but it's got to be something that's tangible that people can figure out. That if they take the number, they divide by 2 or divide by 6 or whatever, they get the number and it's simple. Otherwise, giving just a number with nothing behind it, for me, just doesn't meet my degree of satisfaction. That's it. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Member Wee, followed by Member Davis.
To address that concern, so I based that number by making it a round number and going with the 50% of the median, but then sort of rounding it off to a nice round 72 to make it the math easy. And the same with the mayor, was 75% of the ACS 5-year number, and just rounding that up to 72, or sorry, to 108, just to make it nice round numbers. And so it is based off of that index, but a little bit higher, but inconsequentially higher, just to make it a round number.
And Member Davis.
Thank you. I was going to say that's what I thought you did. You rounded it up. I would personally be slightly more comfortable if we rounded down to like 70,000. And I'm just very, I just feel like we're putting a piñata, or we're putting a target up there, and I want to make the bullseye smaller and smaller and harder to hit, so when people shoot arrows at it. So it's kind of like a friendly amendment I'm offering, but you don't have to take it. It's not going to affect my vote.
Vice Chair Wickham, followed by Member Wee.
I'm totally fine rounding up because this is based on the 5-year ACS for 2023, and the thing would go into effect in 2027, which is 4 years later. And rounding up is totally fine.
Member Wee.
Yeah, I'm going to stick to 72 and 108 as proposed.
Before I call for the vote, I'm sitting here thinking, because personally I'm more comfortable with like the $60,000-$90,000 numbers. I'm not opposed to the 72,108. But I might vote no just because I prefer another number better. But that's okay. But you know, I agree that the 60 number is more arbitrary, and the 72 has at least some grounding. Although you could say, well, the 50% multiplier, where did that come from? And then, okay, it's 2023 numbers. And so by the time it goes into effect, it's old data. And maybe then 70,000 would be the appropriate number. There are a lot of variables here. And so I guess it also comes down to what do we think the voters would find acceptable? Even though I think 72, the council members earn that. But would the voters support that? So that, just to put out there, that's what I'm thinking. We'll go to member Wee, followed by member Vickery.
And one of my reasons for choosing a little bit higher is to give the council more wiggle room because then they can reduce it and they look good.
Member Vickery.
The reason I suggested that the language about the mayors be set as a percentage was because I thought that was easier to explain. It was not an effort to hide the number, but because I think people probably would understand that the mayor's responsibilities are at least that much greater. So that was my thinking behind that way of writing it.
And I would think, given the way that the indexing would apply the same way to both the mayor and the council salaries, they would track. And so whether the charter says the mayor shall be 50% more, or we just pick starting numbers that are, the mayor's 50% more, I think it has the same end result. And then there's also the opportunity in ballot language to explain it. So there's several ways of getting at it. But I think that's, I certainly agree with the sentiment of the concept of it's 50% more is easy to convey. And then it's just, where do you put that language? Member Vickery.
And I don't feel strongly about that. Just make it clear what we're voting on. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on this? Okay. I had to just take a second to think it all through because there's a lot of good input there. So all those in favor of recommending $72,000 for council members and $108,000 a year for the mayor, please raise your hand. Okay. And all those opposed? One. And abstentions? No abstentions. Okay. 8-1. We have a number. Any other comments or requests for straw polls on this item? Member Vickery.
I think we do want to emphasize the professional polling aspect. And so maybe we just want to, I don't know if we need a straw poll on that or not, but it seems to me that the idea that we really want to do the best we can at getting citizen input on this is important.
Yeah, staff.
If I could just respond to that, obviously council would do any professional polling. We do have a budget for that. And it would depend on which items they choose to move forward. So I don't think you necessarily have to recommend that. We could write on in the staff report, because whatever item they choose to explore before they put on the ballot, they would do the professional polling.
I understand that. I didn't always understand it, but I understand it now. But I think what we're talking about is what we think the committee should be saying to the council. And I think we should be emphasizing that we think that's a very important piece of it.
Vice Chair Wickham.
To Gail's point about there is a report and we want to kind of stay grounded to that. There were 3 recommendations and we've had a number of polls. Could we just summarize like what we think the recommendation should be now with respect to
Okay,
the
yeah.
polls and
yeah.
what the recommendations were.
That's great. Okay, so Member Wee, were you wanting to summarize?
Yeah, we've consolidated on, we're going to come out with just one recommendation so that we don't have a choice from our committee. And the salaries are 72,000 and 108,000 for the council members and mayor, with the mayor being 50% more, effective January 1st, 2027, or the language of the January after the election. Keep CPI index as is, so we actually don't have to propose any changes for that piece. That just stays in the charter. And recommend professional polling is another strong recommendation to include.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And I think the subcommittee has heard the feedback about like emphasizing the need for professional polling, excuse me. There is a difference, isn't there? Yeah, so I'm not sure that we need a straw poll on that unless the subcommittee feels like they really want to hear where the committee's at, but I think it's pretty clear that, yeah, we support that. Member Vickery.
I thought Member Rubino's comment that when we're coming up with numbers, they need to be tethered to something was very important. I think what we've done is we have tethered it to the ACS. And so, you know, I feel good about that. If the council decides that that's not feasible for whatever reason, then they can come up with their own tether. But to me, that's responsive to the concern you had.
Yeah, and I think the tethering it to the ACS is tethering a starting point, and then professional polling will then ground the next iteration of it. Yeah, but this is a great starting point. Really appreciative of this. Okay, let's see if there's anything else, or if or let me put it this way, if the subcommittee needs further direction from the committee, raise your hand and let us know. And I'm seeing no hands go up, so I think the subcommittee has clear direction. I'll just kind of look at staff as well if, yeah, they're comfortable as well. That is great. Okay, with that, we can close this item. And we will now move on to non-agenda items and comments. This is for oral reports and announcements by committee members and staff to share information. Do committee members have any non-agenda items or comments? And I see none, so we'll go to staff.
Just as a reminder that our next meeting is on December 4th. And, you know, I think, again, thank you for all the great work. These reports were very easy to read for staff and easy to follow. But for the next steps is all of the subcommittees, we've taken, the committee has taken some direction and provided some feedback. So we expect your final reports. They are due because also of the Thanksgiving holiday. We do need some time to prepare the agenda for that December 4th meeting. So if you can send us all of your final subcommittee reports, they are due to staff by Wednesday, November 19th, which I know is a quick turnaround, but at least on the first item today, there was no changes. So that should be relatively easy to do. And I think we prefer if you can send them all in the Word file so we can go ahead and take that information incorporated into, you know, sort of your draft final report so you can take action on that report at your December 4th meeting. Anything else? Okay.
All right, thank you very much. So this meeting is adjourned at 7:38 p.m. And, oh, I'm sorry. We'll go back to committee comments. Member Vickery.
This was just a question about the reports we're submitting on November 19. My understanding is if we did find something that we thought was consistent with the substance of the conversations, but maybe could be articulate it a little better. I'm thinking, for example, that since we do refer to term limits in the vacancies report, we probably ought to add a sentence about section 604, for example, even though we didn't straw poll or anything. I mean, just so it looks like we knew that 604 was there, which we did, but we didn't say that. So similarly, the guidance that we got on the one I did on regular meetings, there were several suggestions that weren't straw polled. It was just individuals provided suggestions of these improvements. My intention is to include those. So we can still do that, correct?
Yes, you
Yeah.
can. And then again, you would have the final opportunity at the December 4th meeting.
Right. And I also assume we'll then put that in the form of the report from the full committee. That'll be the form of it. It will no longer be in the form of a subcommittee report, because we did some of both in this process.
So what we'll do is we'll take each of your
Right.
subcommittee individual reports. We'll do kind of the background
Right.
that says, who you were, what we did, how
Right.
many times we met, that sort of background. And then, we'll do formatting to make sure
Right.
it's consistent. We may do, some minor edits to
Yeah,
match
exactly.
city style guidelines, things like that. But on that, for the December 4th meeting, we'll have one single report
Right.
for you.
But
So,
just to make
yeah.
things easier on you, if we submit it in the form of the report of the full committee, which is the way it, I think, was intended that we do it to
Yeah.
start with,
Yeah.
that helps you, and
Yeah.
then you make whatever other improvements need to be made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So with that, we are well and truly adjourned at 7:40 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for participating tonight. Good night.